Hello and welcome to my latest video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the cabinets from Golden Demon, which this time was set in Adepticon in Milwaukee. So the venue has moved because in previous years, Golden Demon is attached to Adepticon, and Adepticon was in Chicago previously. So now it's moved to Milwaukee. I think it may have had an impact on some of the attendees for Golden Demon because it's harder to get to Milwaukee. Like from Chicago, it's just, you can get direct flights in there, so you're already right next to the venue when you arrive. With Milwaukee, it's a bit more effort, and I think some painters have decided not to go. But one of those painters was actually me, so I wasn't at this Golden Demon, but I managed to get quite a bit of footage and photographs from a few people that I know who very kindly lent me the things that they've photographed, so that's how I'm able to make this video. So I'm just going on what I've been told in terms of like how good the Golden Demon was, but there are some changes to this Golden Demon compared to previous years. The big change is in terms of awards. So previously you had notable, finalist, commended, then 3 trophies in each category, and then finally the Slayer Sword. This time it's been changed around, so now it goes notable, commended, finalist. So this makes more sense with just the terminology, because you think with the word finalist you're right next to being a winner, whereas before you were finalist and then it was commended, so it was a bit confusing. This does mean though that it's important to note which year the entry is depending on the result, because if you were in 2024 and you got a finalist, then you were not up the rank of commended, whereas this time if you have commended you are not at the rank of finalist. So sometimes people post it and they'll say, look, I've got a finalist, or they've got a commended entry or whatever, so it will depend on the year for which is better, but it does make more sense now. The other big change involved with that is that the pins, well, before it was a mixture of pins and cards. So from my experience from the last Golden Demon that I went to, which was Golden Demon Essen, you had notable, which was a card, then finalist, which was a pin, and then commended, which was a card. There has been a difference between America and the European and UK Golden Demons, where the commended card was white in America and then black in the UK or Europe. I don't know what the reasoning behind that was. I'm guessing it's just whatever printer they could find to get the cards, but it was something that was a bit weird between the two things. But there are no cards anymore now, so it's purely pins. So you now have a pin for notable, pin for commended, and a pin for finalist. The pins are also, they all are the same in design, but they now have different colours. And part of the reasoning for this is, I believe, that it's now very or they've tried to make it obvious that it's a hybrid system. And by that I mean that in many painting competitions what you'll have is like an open system. So with an open system, what happens is everyone can enter, and there are no real distinct sometimes there are a few categories, but there are not too many, and all you're doing is separating out the standard between gold, silver and bronze. And sometimes you'll pick out various things for you'll have a best in show, or maybe best painted or something like that, but they're just one-off prizes. And apart from that, you're just trying to get within a category or within a standard. So there is obviously the gold and silver and bronze standard, but there's not just one. So in Golden Demon, the top 3 for the trophies it's just one trophy for gold, one for silver, one for bronze, and only one person can win whatever colour trophy. But in the open style, any number of people can win gold, silver or bronze. You just have to be good enough at that standard. because what happens in Golden Demon is you could have like 10 amazing painters, all equally good with equally good models, but you only get one gold winner. So it doesn't matter really how much effort you put in. If everyone's kind of like equal, they still have to pick like the top 3 from that. And even if like say within those 10 they're all equally good, there's 7 people going to get nothing in terms of trophies. But because they have this new system where they have gold, silver and bronze for notable, commended and finalist, this is like the open style now. So I say any number, there are fewer as you go up through the ranks. So I think any number of people can have notable, then commended you get fewer, and then finalist fewer still. What tends to happen is, depending on how highly entered the category is, you can get like 4 or 5 finalists, maybe all the way up to maybe 10, I guess, in a really strong category, that kind of thing anyway. So it's not a purely open style system, but it's close enough. Like there's a lot more chance to get some form of award anyway now, which is a good thing in my opinion. And I think there is definitely a situation where, especially for veteran painters that have been to Golden Demon and they've got trophies, the problem is now there are so many people that do it, so many professional painters as such, that so it's like I was talking about a moment ago, you can have quite a large number of professional painters and people that paint for a living like I do, entering a category, and they're not going to get anything in terms of a top 3 trophy, but they're also stopping other people from getting trophies as well. And what then happens is that people just think, oh, it's not worth entering because I can't get a trophy. But with this new push towards the sort of open style, I think you have to look at Golden Demon slightly differently now. So the main competition is the novice, not the notable, the commended and the finalist. That's where you're getting your gold, silver and bronze awards from. Then the top 3 above that, those are more like the specialist, like I said, for a standard open competition from say something like Monte Sansovino or whatever. In those you will have like best painted, like best atmosphere, just random kind of prizes. I think that's more of a way of how you should really look at the top 3, because it definitely seems to me that it's not always the case that the best painted models are getting the top 3, but they are hitting whatever metrics that Games Workshop are using to get an award. And in some cases it can be that something looks really cool, but it could be also true that things that are in the finalist category or finalist level, they might have better refinement or whatever. Like there are different things that are obviously the judges are going to use to base on what they think the top 3 should be. Now, quite often you'll hear people say that you have to paint heavy metal style to win, and it's just not true. It hasn't been true for a long time, if ever. But Golden Demon has traditionally favoured a very refined painting. So you can have different styles. You can have like large volumetric highlights. You can use heavy metal style painting. You can use very saturated colours, all sorts of things. What you tend to not do so well with traditionally is visible brushstrokes. So sometimes you're trying to be creative and maybe a bit looser with your style of painting, and it can still look really cool, but it's more like a painterly style of the work that you're doing, and that wouldn't usually get anything. Even if it looks cool, it wouldn't get a top 3 trophy. However, I think now it seems that the coolness, which is very hard to verbalize it on what they're looking for in terms of that, but from my perspective, it seems to be, does it hit certain aspects of the game world, the story, the atmosphere of the Games Workshop product. So like if you've got like a Horus Heresy entry, you'll want something that would fit really well within that setting in terms of, does it look cool? Is it like a last stand of like Marines all killing each other or whatever? Does it really fit in, and does it look cool, and is it very impactful when you see it? And that, even if it's not painted very smoothly or cleanly, could still end up now getting a trophy, whereas before it would be very hard for that to get a trophy if it was sort of like rougher or with obvious brushstrokes. I think a good example of that now is actually the Slayer Sword winner. It will be in the video, and you can check it out on the Games Workshop website. There's like interviews and everything about it, and it looks really, really cool. But it is interesting because it is significantly different from what would normally be awarded. So, as I mentioned, normally levels of refinement, which doesn't mean heavy metal style. And I can't stress this enough, because it's quite annoying when you see posts over and over saying you've got to paint heavy metal style to win a trophy, and it's not true. It just isn't true, and I don't understand why people keep saying that. But it does mean that you have to be neat. Whereas the Slayer Sword winner this time was much looser and freer in the style of the painting. And that doesn't mean that the painting is bad. It just means that each brush mark is more carefully considered, even if it's obvious, or visible rather. And it's a skill in its own right to make something like that look really good. You can't. So when I say something is looser, it doesn't mean to say that they haven't painted it properly or spent time on it, or made really considered efforts with the brush marks. It's a real skill to be able to do that. There are lots of different painters that paint in this style, and quite often these painters have not entered Golden Demon, because even though they're very famous, very successful within their own right, when they entered Golden Demon they wouldn't get anything, because the level of refinement, the smoothness of the finish of the brushwork, how neat and clean the blending is, all that kind of stuff, that wasn't their priority. They were more concerned in the atmosphere, the presentation, the impact, all sorts of things. Not to say that you can't paint with those things anyway, but it takes a very long time to end up to have something that's perfectly smooth and clean, and it's almost, you almost don't appreciate that. So you can paint something very quickly to a high standard with all these nice light and high contrast and like nice saturation and whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. You can do all that quite quickly, but the refining process can take hundreds of hours, and it takes away from the original artwork sometimes, I feel, or I found that with some of my own artwork anyway, where you're working on it and you've got these really like the lovely marks that you've painted on a model, but you can see the brushstroke, and then you have to refine it and blend it all in and make everything look perfect, and then you look at it and you feel like it's lost a lot of the energy that you really had on the piece. It becomes almost sterile because you spent so long trying to hide all of the original brush marks on there. But it's actually quite freeing to not have to worry about that. Now, I'm not saying that you can just paint something very quick and loose and win a Slayer Sword. That's not true. Like, it still has to have a level of refinement and quality to it, but the overall impact of the piece is now so much more important. Now, it just depends which side of the fence you'll fall on whether you think this is a positive or a negative. It does make it harder to know exactly what the judges are looking for. Like, so when you're looking for something that's very cleanly and precisely rendered, and this is part of the reason why heavy metal style would do well, is because it's easier to see exactly how clean and well rendered that can be. And a good example of that is the Slayer Sword winner from Essen, because that was like heavy metal standard taken to a very extreme level. Super smooth, super clean. Like, you couldn't see a brush mark on it. It was so perfect in terms of refinement. And then that is the direct opposite of the Slayer sword in this case, which is much looser, more flowing, where you can see brush marks on it. Yet the impact is incredibly high. When you see the photos of this, it's so well painted, with like excellent focus and contrast and color saturation, and just the sort of making it fit within the Warhammer kind of universe. So it works really well in that situation. And I think it is a positive thing that models like that now, or the sort of more expressive styles of painting, are being awarded. The only thing to go along with that is it does again make it harder to judge individually about what is the best painted piece. So if you have something that's very sort of flowing and looser style and paint work, but incredibly impactful, and something that is incredibly neat and precise, but maybe doesn't stand out, which one do you pick? Like, if you look at them very closely, you will see the perfection in the paintwork of the very neat one, and then you'll be like, well, the other one hasn't got that level of refinement, so the neat one wins. But then if you hold them further away and you look at the impact, you think, well, the neat one isn't standing out, but the other one, it's really catching my eye and it looks very attractive, so then that one wins. But you're comparing different things to decide which is the best. So it becomes much more of a case of feel. It's hard to decide, like, because, so the reason I say this is because I do judge painting competitions myself, so it's tricky to separate some of these things out, and you can't just have like a little set of tick boxes to say, well, it's done this and this, so this one has more ticks than that one, so this one wins. It doesn't really work like that, because you can have something that looks really unattractive and doesn't work together. It's not very harmonious with the way it's painted, but it can still have all the ticks for the boxes, or most of them anyway, but it just doesn't look very good. So kind of what it sort of boils down to, I think, for me personally anyway, when looking at things that are winning now, it's this case of, does it work or does it not? Like, or how well does it achieve what the sort of like the look of the piece is going for? And that then becomes a case of interpretation. So it is a tricky thing, and I don't really know what the answer is in terms of selecting winners from, if you're just going from these very like different styles of judging from how Games Workshop used to do Golden Demon compared to how they do it now. I think people will adapt to this newer style of judging, because, well, you have to, because that's the way it is. And it might just be a case that some people aren't so keen on painting a certain way, but just because in this case the Slayer sword was won by a looser, more flowing, more expressive style of painting, the previous Golden Demon, it was a much tighter, much cleaner, although super impressive style of painting as well. I think the main similarity between the two is they were both Age of Sigmar monsters, so very large pieces, and my maybe slight concern about this is that it's meaning that because they're looking for very impactful, and this is just my interpretation, I could be completely wrong what they're looking for, like I don't know, like I've had a lot of experience with Golden Demon, I've seen so many weird winners, I've seen all these models in my hands and things, so I've had a good idea of what judges are looking for, but with my new interpretation of they're looking for something very cool, very fitting within the setting, and whatever technique you use is just how well you do that technique. So if you want super refined, you have to do super refined very well. If you want super expressive, you have to do super expressive very well. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you do whatever it is well. But because they're going for this very impactful look of what they're picking as winners, then what I think it will mean is that, and it does seem to be going this way, is that entries are getting larger. The bases are becoming more like dioramas. You can't really get away too much with simple bases anymore, it seems. Everything has to be like a display on its own. Each piece, it doesn't matter which category, it seems to need to tell some sort of story, or like just have a really good setting within it. So it's not just purely a painting competition anymore. It's almost like a mini diorama. Not really diorama, but you know what I mean. It has to be displayed in a way that it will just hit you straight away when you see it and look very impressive, and then still carry on being impressive the more you look at it getting closer, looking for details and interesting parts on the model. Having said that, at Essen, with almost the same judging team, I think there was a little bit of move around, but it was almost the same. There was an ultramarine, I think, that won, that was like a box art standard ultramarine, like with a simple base. It got silver, I think. So even in that case, I'm wrong in what I'm saying, is that they have picked an heavy metal style, very clean, very precise, very well painted piece, but it didn't have any of these new things I've just been talking about. But I think that was more of a one-off. I didn't, so from the general feel of it and things from Essen that didn't necessarily do as well as I expected them to, that were incredibly refined, neat, like mind-bendingly neatly painted, that didn't do very well. I feel, and also things that won that were much more loose and expressive in their painting. I think the general result seems to be that you do have to go for these very complex pieces. I don't mean just complex in terms of painting, but complex in the design, just the whole build process with the basing and the way it's presented. So I would bear that in mind if you're going to enter Golden Demon, that what you have to paint is no longer just purely painting. It is how well the piece sort of like jumps out, how like the story that it's telling, because ultimately it is a Games Workshop competition and they want these pieces to represent the Games Workshop game worlds. So it doesn't matter like how well it's painted if it doesn't achieve the sense of fitting in. For example, if you've painted a Horus Heresy piece, if it doesn't look like it would fit in the Horus Heresy, it's not going to win. If it doesn't fit the lore, it's not going to win. You know, you have to follow these guidelines. Well, they're not guidelines; these are strict lines that you can't break. That does mean that you have to push your level of creativity within these boundaries. So in some cases, having a boundary can force you to be creative because you want to see what you can do within those boundaries. Whereas if you're just able to paint whatever you want, sure, it can be more of an art piece, and I say that in air quotes, but you're not, because you don't have any boundaries as such when you're doing something like that, and it can be very weird and wonderful and like amazing or whatever, but you haven't had to limit yourself in a certain way and then to squeeze as much out of it as you can within a boundary, so you don't have those, you know, that sort of that push to just try and see how far you can get within a boundary. So I do think having these things can be interesting but because of that, it does mean that sometimes the results can be a little bit unexpected when you see how far people have tried to push it. So sometimes you can have some controversies. We've seen that in previous Golden Demons, but at the same time, Games Workshop will take into account how things are perceived within the painting community, and also what they want in terms of models winning, and then that will then be adapted as we go along. So in this case, now you saw there were some rules updates where you are no longer allowed to get somebody else to sculpt a model for you, and then you just paint it. This was a quite a common thing, especially for open competition models. You'll get quite a lot of large scale pieces where they've had a professional sculptor sculpt something for you, and then you just paint it yourself. And I know people complained about that in some cases because it gives you a bit of from my perspective, it gives you a slight unfair advantage, because no one will have seen this model before, and you haven't had to create it yourself, somebody else has done it for you. So when the judges look at that model when judging it, it has an instant impact on them because it's new and fresh. It's not like a model that they've seen like a million times just painted in a different way. So that can have it can help you, but also it means that the negative part of them not having that anymore is that you get a lot less of these sort of entries. Now that's not to say that you can't sculpt something yourself. So you are allowed to do that, and indeed the old world winner on this with the Chaos Dwarf on the flying bull, Lamassu. No, that's the one that's not the Lamassu, the other one, but whatever it is, right? That was 100% sculpted by the artist. So he sculpted and painted it himself, and that won gold. So that you can see clearly that you are allowed to do that, but what he couldn't have done was paid someone to sculpt that for him and then paint it and enter it. But what I'm saying here is that you need to get good at sculpting. And I'm being a bit facetious there, but it does mean that you have to find some way to make your model stand out, and having a really nice base that adds to the story will certainly add to that. So you do actually have to make some effort, and it might just be a case that you get really good at kit bashing. But whatever it is, trying to do things to make your model stand out and not relying purely on how well you can paint something to the ultimate level of refinement, because there's quite a lot of people that can do that now, and models can be painted so refined, but it becomes almost impossible to separate them out from that level of refinement, and it's more of a case of how long do you want to spend on a piece. And what could end up happening if you only go for refinement is whoever paints the biggest piece wins. So if you paint the small model, like the skink that won the Slayer Sword previously, that was amazing. But then if someone came along with, say, like a Troggoth or whatever, and painted it equally as refined and as impactful as the little one, then surely the Troggoth automatically wins. So then someone else goes, oh, so that's what that I need to do to win, so I'll do a diorama with 2 Troggoths, so that's bigger again. So does that automatically win just because it's bigger with the same level of refinement and impact? So it just becomes who spends more time on the model. Whereas now the artistic element of the piece, that sounds bad the way that I put it, but the sort of just how cool the piece looks as such has a bigger impact rather than just, can I make a seamless, perfect blend, which is, it does bring issues within the painting competition, because people will, depending on what their preferences are for their style of painting, if something very loose wins and they're very refined in their style of painting, then they're probably not going to be very happy that whatever thing beats them, and again vice versa. So there's always discussions about Golden Demon and what should and shouldn't win, and because they're so secretive on the criteria they use, it's just left for the painters that enter to try and guess. So that's what I'm doing here. I have a lot of experience with Golden Demon. I've been to so many. I've been doing it since the 90s, entering Golden Demons. I know loads of the painters have entered and all that. I've talked to judges before as well, so it's like I should have a good knowledge base of being able to pick winners, but even then, I get surprised with the results sometimes. And it's going to happen. That's what happens with painting competitions. And I think it's important to remember as well that just because you might not agree with the results, it doesn't mean the results are wrong, because ultimately it's a Games Workshop painting competition. But anyway, after I've waffled on a little bit there, I'm going to talk a bit more about this specific Golden Demon. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it's now moved to Milwaukee, and because of that, the setup has now changed. So the feedback that I've had from this is that the setup of the cabinets now is much better than it was at Chicago. In Chicago, it had kind of an oval sort of shape, or more rectangle really, and half of the cabinets were in direct sunlight and half were very shaded. So depending on where you were placed, what categories you were in, or whatever, people could have a very different view of the quality of your work. And indeed, the lighting hitting it can make such a huge difference to how the models look. And you can see a little bit of that actually just in the photos and videos that I've got, just with the different settings that have been used depending on how it's been recorded, or whether it's in a video or just a photo. So the way the models are viewed can make a huge impact. And this isn't really important for judging, because the judges will look at the model and the lamps or whatever, so that shouldn't impact the results. But the thing with Golden Demon is part of the enjoyment and the fun is turning up to the event, looking at everyone else's pieces. So if you're going around looking at the cabinets and you've got some horrible lighting situation where the sun's coming in and blanking everything out, or just making a mess of the paintwork, then it's not very fair on the painters, because of all the time and effort they've put into painting the models, and then the displays really not doing them any favors. But it's also not really fair on those people that just turn up because they want to look at cool models, and they can't really see what they look like either. So the new venue, the new setup, was a big improvement. So they're all in one long line now, which is sounds quite good to me anyway. The lighting in the cabinets, from what I understand, is very similar to the previous Golden Demons. So that just means that it can be good or bad. I mean, it's lighting in a cabinet, and you have to remember as well that they're putting models into cabinets, and they've got a lot of models to place in there. So not everything can be positioned in the ideal position. But certain areas within a cabinet space will look better than others. If you have light direction painting on your model, and you put it next to LEDs that come in the side of the cabinet, and it's lit from the opposite side to the way you've painted the lighting on it, so it's lighting up all the shadow areas, it's just going to look bad, and you can't fix that. That's just the way it is. But if you can be more centralized with a nice softer top-down lighting in there, then it will it'll look a bit better. But the lighting is very similar, as far as I understand it, to the previous Golden Demons anyway. What I would recommend though is, what you can do if you have your phone is just turn the torch on your phone on, and then hold that slightly above the model. It's not perfect, but it will help to kind of focus the lighting a little bit, so you get a better look at the model, and it will probably help it to look a bit better as well. Or you could have your own LED setup or whatever. It's not going to make it perfect, because you're still going to have light impacts from the other part lighting in the cabinet, and it can still completely mess up certain things. The worst at actual lighting is if you get something that's underlit, which there's nothing you can do to make that look good. But ultimately, if you just use your phone LED or whatever, you can see some of the models a bit more clearly, and it will depend on where they are in the cabinets. You might not even need to, but if something is a bit out of the way in shadow or whatever, then you can get a clearer look. But with this Golden Demon as well, because there are fewer entries, I feel maybe that some of the placement would be a bit nicer for some of the people, so you could see the models more clearly. You'll probably notice in this video that there's a bit of repetition. I've tried to cut out a lot of that, but it's a lot of footage and photos to go through, and there's a limit to how much time I'm going to take to just cropping out everything. But I think it gives a good indication of the number of entries that were involved. So when I say that, it's not a knock on the competition. It's purely just a case of do people enter or not. But I say it because when you look at the winners, the thing is, the winners are all still world-class painters, and you'll probably recognise a lot of the names on there, because there'll be repeat winners from previous Golden Demons. So when you see the top three are always going to be good, because you will have good painters. And it's like I said before, you could have 10 amazing painters, and there's only going to be 3 winners, but that just means there are 7 still amazing pieces. And I'm just saying, being arbitrary with that number. You could have 20 amazing pieces, whatever, but it's still only 3 winners. But what happened in this Golden Demon was, because there were fewer entries, so that includes fewer pros entering as well, in some of the categories, there weren't that many finalists. And I think, again, I could be wrong, but I think from what I was told, that in some categories there were only 3 finalists. So if you remember earlier, I was talking about, so you have your notable, commended, and finalist. The top 3 for each category are picked from the finalist winners. Now, there are not, as far as I understand, a set number of finalists to pick from. So it's not like, oh, we have to have 5 finalists in each category. It's just depending on what the judges think the models are suitable to be put into the finalist category, finalist award level, and it's from those finalists that the winners are picked. But if there are only 3 finalists, then that's it. Those 3 people are going to get trophies, so they don't have to worry if they're getting a trophy or not. And I think that's a little bit disappointing. But at the same time, there's nothing that the judges can do about that. They are limited by the number of entries and number of high quality entries to be able to pick trophy winners from. Now, it could be the case if they had the option, and it has been done in previous Golden Demons. Now, I don't know how popular it would be, and it would be very harsh, I suppose, but you could have it where the judges decide that things are not good enough to say, maybe there's not a gold trophy standard model within the award. So if you just say like 3 finalists and those 3 automatically get a trophy, you might think, well, make it a bit harder. So you think from those 3, maybe only 2 get trophies and 1 stays with the finalist award, and then there'll just be a silver and a bronze. Now, I think people will probably complain about that, but like I said, it has been done before, and it just makes it a little bit harsher, because it does seem that on some of the categories where there are fewer entries involved, that it seems like, you know, if you've guaranteed a trophy, then you've got a very relaxed situation to be in, where if you're in, say, one of the single model categories and there are like 10 amazing pieces to pick from for the top 3, that's a very stressful situation, and you're going to be getting up in front of everyone when they're calling out the awards, and there's a significant number of people not going to get any trophies who are very good painters. So, you know, maybe something that could be done like that, but I doubt that would be, like I say, I doubt that would be very popular. But just an idea, because I said it has been done before. One other thing to look at when I was going through this Golden Demons, going through the results, was that there were quite a few re-entry pieces, and also there was a significant number that were re-entries that won trophies. Now, this happens, I think, nearly every Golden Demon. You know, there's nothing wrong really with re-entries. I mean, I've put in re-entries myself and even won trophies with re-entry pieces, but the general idea is, if you have a piece that hasn't won anything when you've entered it, then you go back and you rework it a bit, so that then, you know, when the judges look at it, they can see if you've tried to make any improvements. So it's kind of more acceptable then to get an award because you've tried to make an improvement because it didn't do very well last time. Of course, there is the case where when it didn't get an award, it might just have been that it was a tougher category at the time, so there were more pieces that were, you know, competing for a trophy, and you just missed out. And then this time there are fewer pieces, and so you kind of rise to the top within the options available for the judges. But it is something that can be, you know, people mention it when you can see something that maybe got like a notable or finalist, so maybe not even at the last Golden Demon, say a commended standard piece, and then it gets like a silver or gold, for example, in the next competition without really any changes to it. It can be an indication that maybe the standard isn't quite as high as it could be, because obviously with the same judges, or mostly the same judges anyway, they will be aware. Now, you can't remember every model you've judged, but hopefully they'll have a good idea if a piece is, you know, competing for a trophy or not, if they've seen it before. So, you know, they should be aware. And for my preference anyway, if there's a piece that's been re-entered and then there's another piece next to it and they're both kind of equally good, and the other piece is a brand new entry, then I would prefer if the brand new entry got the trophy over the repeat piece, just for the fact that it's a new entry. But if it's a repeat piece that has been worked on, then I think it's fair to just treat that as a new entry as well, because obviously when you don't win something, you want to know why, you make an effort to improve it or whatever, and then of course that should be regarded as, an acceptable entry. So while I've been talking there, just waffling on, you've hopefully had a good look at all the models that have been shown in the video. Now obviously I wasn't there, and the people that recorded this footage and took the photos and things, I don't know if they've covered everything or the majority of what was available, but I get the impression that I think a good amount of stuff has been covered in the video, so it gives me like a general idea of what the competition was like. There were a few interesting kind of repeating themes within some of the pieces. Now I've already gone over how bases seem to be going much more in the diorama kind of direction, but also the number of backdrops I think is kind of interesting. So backdrops and water effects on the base. So this is becoming more and more prevalent. I'm not sure that people are always doing themselves the best, or giving themselves the best chance with just automatically, say, doing a backdrop. I know that backdrops have been popular, like people like Neil Hollis have done very well with their backdrops, even though there was the kind of discussion about the use of AI on the backdrop, which I disagree with using AI on it, but that was up to Games Workshop to decide at the time, and they obviously decided to award it. So I see that people have noted that backdrops have been getting awards, and I think that they've been kind of thinking that's what judges are looking for, so people have gone that way. And I do think that you have to be a little bit cautious when you're doing a backdrop. Now in one sense they can be really useful tools to display the model, to give you a nice background, like as a contrasting color, or just something to frame the model, just to give it a really nice look. It can make certain colors pop out really well. It also means that you can kind of avoid painting the back a little bit, or not spend as much time on it, just because it's not that visible from a straight on rear perspective. At the same time though, if you just assume that by painting a backdrop it will improve your chances, and then you try and do a freehand backdrop, unless you can paint a freehand up to the same standard as the model that you've painted, it will actually hurt your chances, and it will make the overall look of the piece just be less effective. So it's something that you have to be a little bit careful when you're going for. Don't just automatically assume that just doing something makes it better. Whatever it is that you do, you have to do it well. It's kind of similar as well for water bases. They're becoming very common. Lots of fish in water because on these bases, and there's also, it's not just a case of doing them well. I think you also have to be careful that things can start to get a bit samey. So somebody does a water base, it looks amazing, and then someone else does one, it's like, oh yeah, it's pretty good, and then after that it says, oh, I've seen this before 10 times already. Although it's done very competently, it's still, you're not really being creative, you're just doing the same thing as somebody else. So really, to stand out, you need to consider what it is that you're doing and try to be unique, just to make it interesting to look at. Because if some people do like just 10 heavy metal box art pieces, and then you're comparing those, it's not very exciting. Like they can all be very competently painted, and then how do you separate them out? There are very limited options then if it's just everything's just like a copy of some box art. It's better if you can be as individual as possible, while also making the finished piece of a very high standard. So just there on the screen you can see the 3 new pins for the sort of like the open competition section of the Golden Demon. So remember, it's notable, commended and finalist, and they all look the same, and they're just different colours, but they are larger, so they're quite different looking to the previous finalist pin. So I think they, it's quite a nice trophy to have. It feels a bit more substantial than before, especially for the card awards that you would have. I always felt like the commended entry, which remember at the time was the highest level in this section, it felt a bit weak that it was a piece of card that you were awarded, when the award below that was a pin, and the pin seemed better than the card. So now you get a pin whatever, and it just depends on the color of it. I think this is much better, and it kind of reinforces that open competition style system where they're, that's the main area of the competition that everyone's involved in, and then it's kind of more, there is obviously elements of skill and whatever else that is going to go into the top 3 being selected, but there is a bit of luck involved. Whereas if you focus on getting that gold finalist pin, then that really is a case of you're being judged, and you can achieve that regardless pretty much of what other people are painting, because it is a case of there are a significant number of these awards available to people, whereas for the top 3 there are only 3, and it doesn't, you might just be unlucky. You could paint it well enough for a trophy, but there just aren't enough spots for you to get your trophy. So I'm running out of things to say now for this Golden Demon. Just a little bit of the feedback that I'd got from the people that attended. The event venue was apparently very good. Everyone's happy with this choice. The cabinets were open 24 hours a day, so you can go and have a look whenever. So if you found that during the day it was a little bit crowded and you couldn't get a good look around, you could still go back later, maybe do some filming or whatever, when there's less people there, fewer people there, sorry. And it just makes it a little bit more chill, and you were able to see all the pieces. I don't think there were any massive controversies. There's always some discussion. I'm not going to put my opinion on what I think should and shouldn't win, because really I don't think that's very fair, especially when I wasn't there to see the pieces in person. But also I think it's very unfair on the people that win. If some random person on the internet is just saying, oh, I think that shouldn't have won and that should have, I don't think that's that helpful. But ultimately, like in previous years, there have been some larger controversies. In this one there were a few grumbles here and there, but generally I think people were pretty happy with the results. And from what I can see from the photographs of the winners, so if you go and check out the Games Workshop website to see the winners and the finalist entries as well, it's a very high standard for the things that won. And I think it's just a case of there weren't that many entries to have a massive selection from the winners, but regardless of that, the winners themselves were very good. So ultimately it doesn't matter really, like you get very good pieces and everyone gets to see them, so it's a good celebration of model painting. As I said, I'm running out of things to say now about the competition. I would recommend still, if you're interested in Golden Demon, to give it a go. I think the new system where it's more open, because the hybrid system, so you can aim for that bronze, silver and gold open style, notable, commended and finalist section. It makes it a bit more easygoing, and you have, it's not just a case of you're going to miss out even if you're a very good painter. So I would recommend giving it a go just to see what it's like, and just to see the actual models in person, because it can be quite startling. I know I've had people come with me and they've seen all the models online, then they see them in person, and when you actually get to hold some of these pieces and you see how insane some of the details, the lighting, the just the painting in general, how good they actually are in person. Because when you see these things online, the photos make the models look very big, but they're tiny. Some of these models are really, really tiny, especially if you're looking at small scale, Lord of the Rings, something like that. Those things always come off worse in photos than they do in person, because you have to blow them up so much to see what they look like. Whereas if you get like a very large scale piece, it gets shrunk down, so actually that has the big advantage online. You see them in person though, you actually see how small some of these things are, and the amount of time and detail and effort that's gone into them. It's very kind of shocking, I think, if you haven't experienced that before. But as I said, that's about it. That's my take for the Golden Demon as such. I'm going to leave it, so there's still a good bit left of footage to go through, and some photos as well. So if you want to have a look and see if your models were captured, then please feel free to look through it. I'll just leave some music playing in the background, so there's something to listen to while you look at it. But anyway, that's the end of me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.